Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. I've said on this platform that Zimbabwe is a failed state. And one of the reasons why we are a failed state is because for the last 45 years, the country has been stuck with this corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical ZANU-PF dictatorship. The people, by the late 1990s, realized that as long as ZANU-PF continue to exercise the carte blanche powers to rig the elections, the country will never get out of this mess. So at that point, the people came to the conclusion that they needed democratic change. They needed to implement democratic changes that would stop ZANU-PF rigging the elections. And that realization is what led to the nation calling for democratic changes and the formation of the MDC, the Movement for Democratic Change, by Morgan Tsvangirai and his friends. They were promising to deliver the democratic changes the nation was dying for. One of the tragic realities of Zimbabwe is that having got to that point, the people, or some people, or many people, seem to have forgotten what it was all about. They were now concentrating just electing MDC leaders into positions of power and authority. No supervision whatsoever. And so when MDC leaders failed to implement even one token reform in 25 years, the big disappointment is, why is it that the people themselves have failed to realize what is going on here? Because the truth of the matter is, they have failed to realize it. And that is at the root of our problem. There have been many opportunities for Zimbabweans to realize that the MDC CCC were selling out. Here is one of those opportunities. In 2013, the elections. The video clip I'm going to show you here is meant to show you that there was absolutely no doubt that ZANU-PF was rigging the elections.
How can we cheat like this?
There are some buses which are here.
Two buses there. One street in Mount Pleasant. One street. I think we shouldn't allow this. Officer, we don't want to be accused of disruptive, but this is not on. We can't allow this. Ask anyone who's clean show van. Ask this one, where does he stay in Mount Pleasant?
I will tell you to my senior at Mount Pleasant.
All right, I'm going there. But you can see it's reading about it.
Yeah.
We can send
But
the release.
We'll take note of it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
but
can't.
you don't take note of them. Stop Iran.
That's why
Stop-
I'm
Yeah,
going to
stop
check.
Iran
Yeah,
process.
we'll stop around because this
Stop
is not
the
on
process.
that we can have this blatant cheating.
Raw
From the
areas.
raw areas, yes.
Yeah.
Taken to thing. And then posting as officers. Eh? They've been passed by those buses, as you can see, as one of them, a single address in Mount Pleasant. Just one. You need the bus to come from Morris Depot. Morris Depot is just across the road. You need the bus to come from Morris Depot.
But their slips
Yeah.
retain one place.
So why were they carrying with buses?
Minister,
Eh?
just take a sample of 5. Go to the voters room with the slips. You find them not in the voters room.
They're not in the voters room.
But their slips are retain one present, so we don't have the powers. So
When you are recruited, you have to shave your head into the police.
So they are. You think they are in the police in a
They're
raw
not
area?
genuine.
Not genuine.
I'll stop it there. What this video clip showed, beyond all reasonable doubt, was that this election process was flawed. What is of great interest here is what Tendai Biti did next. The elections went ahead and Tendai Biti was declared the winner. And guess what he did? He didn't take up the issue of all the glaring evidence of vote rigging. What we must remember here is that Tendai Biti was standing in Mount Pleasant, an urban constituency. If the blatant vote rigging was happening in an urban environment where the regime knows that there are a lot of eyes who will see what's going on, what more in the rural areas where they know there are very few people who dare, even if they see something wrong, who dare raise it up. So whatever we have seen in this video happening in the urban centers, we can bet that the situation was worse in the rural areas. So here was a situation where we have got a window into how ZANU-PF was rigging the elections. And instead of saying, this is totally unacceptable, let's thoroughly investigate, make sure that this does not happen ever again. What did Tendai Biti and his colleagues do? They accepted the results because they got their seat. This is at the heart of the problem with our opposition. As much as at the beginning, they were saying they're a movement for democratic change, they were not. All they wanted to secure for themselves a Grevitrend seat. And if that meant they, in their own urban constituency, win their seat, and ZANU-PF rigs the elections the rest of the country, that's fine by them. And ZANU-PF had an easy situation here, divide and rule. As long as they can make sure that a few of the opposition leaders, particularly in the urban centers, win their Grevitrend seats, they know that the opposition is divided. Those who lost their seats, as much as they would want to challenge the result, they'll find themselves in a situation where their colleagues and some of them were more articulate, are not interested in challenging the process. They've secured their seat, and that's all they care about. It comes back to the original argument. What is it the people wanted? Free, fair, and credible elections. Not only in the urban centers, and in the whole country. So the opposition is not meant to just secure elections for themselves in the urban centers, but for the whole country. And anyone who has been following Zimbabwe politics will tell you that the opposition have never, ever had any commitment to getting reforms implemented so that the whole country has free, fair, and credible elections. People like Tendai Biti have always fought to represent the opposition to contest elections in the urban centers, because they knew that in the rural areas, the so-called ZANU-PF strongholds, they didn't have a chance. ZANU-PF's vote rigging machinery was even more evident. That's even more ruthless. In 2023, there was a voice recording and audio of Mnangagwa boasting that when the day of voting comes, the villagers will be led by the headmen to go to march them to the polling station. The headman will be in front, the villagers will follow behind him, and behind them, the ZANU-PF chairman. And the party would know who voted, how each one of them voted. And true enough, the party does know. They have increased the number of polling stations. They've made sure that now polling stations are, the voters' roll is now a polling station voters' roll. You cannot vote anywhere else, you can only vote at one polling station. And ZANU-PF officials will be monitoring each polling station. Results are counted at each polling station. And as results come in, the ZANU-PF officials will be able to say, of the 200 or whatever number of people who voted, X voted for ZANU-PF and Y voted for the opposition. They will be able to identify with a degree of accuracy who those people who voted for the opposition are. Your vote is no longer a secret. The blatant vote rigging in the rural areas particularly is shocking. And there are 25 years since the formation of the MDC. Nothing has changed. Why? Because the opposition have been quite content with winning the few gravy train seats in the urban centers and left ZANU-PF to continue rigging the elections in the rural areas. The people themselves are to blame. Why have you failed to realize what is going on here? I think one of the explanations was given by the late Edson Shombo. He identified the problem and called it the Mozambique syndrome. And the Mozambique syndrome can really be defined as the following. He said during the party, ZANU-PF, political activities in Mozambique, they would have problems or issues to discuss within the party. And he quickly realized that his colleagues, whenever they were losing the argument, they would accuse the other side of being CIA, American spies. And he said, since independence, the same individual now would accuse you of being an American puppet. And this was just a way of avoiding the real important issues, the substantive issues. And I think he was right. This has been a weakness in our society, where instead of discussing the substantive issues and finding solutions to them, we always look for the easy route out. Either you pretend the problem is not there, or you find a scapegoat. Let me say this. This has not served the country well. This has been a disaster for the country. Because no nation can afford to be so reckless. And we have paid dearly for it. The reason why Zimbabwe is a failed state, as I stated at the beginning, is because we have failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections. While we identified and acknowledged the problem of ZANU-PF rigging the elections in the late 1990s, and many have risked their lives, livelihoods, limbs, to elect MDC, CCC leaders into positions of power and authority, we have nonetheless failed to realize that the opposition have let us down. They've sold out big time. MDC, CCC leaders have failed to implement even one token reform in 25 years, including the 5 years in the GNU. And we have failed to realize it. At the present moment, if you were to ask, where do ordinary Zimbabweans expect change to come from? Many have reverted back to the notion that ZANU-PF will implement reforms. ZANU-PF will never reform itself out of office. And so we've got to revert back. We want an opposition that will implement the reforms. And our failure to acknowledge that MDC, CCC leaders have failed to implement even one token reform is our fault. Nations suffer because of such failures. And we in Zimbabwe have paid dearly for this problem. think about it. Thank you very much, those who were able to join this evening. Have a good evening.